بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. Now before we get to sarf of the zakah, I just want to mention an interesting mas'ala, an important one, and that is with regards to the day of zakah. We've mentioned that many of the salaf, we mentioned that what they call the month of zakah. إن هذا الشهر شهر زكاتكم. Uthman radiallahu anhu used to announce that this is the month of zakah. Therefore, calculate what you have worth and pay your debts, and then give zakah, and give zakah on the remaining. So what is this month? We mentioned the month of zakah. So he's telling the people that this is your month of zakah. So give out, calculate and give out your zakah. We mentioned some of the fuqaha conclude that it's Sha'ban, others say Muharram, others say Ramadan. Others say Ramadan. And many people like to give out their zakah in Ramadan. Now, we mentioned this aspect of doing this calculations on your day of zakah and your ikhraj of that amount. So the fuqaha say that your aspect of ikhraj, taking out this amount of zakah, we separated it between sarf. Sarf is giving it to the poor. That can be delayed in reason, we'll mention it after. But this aspect of ikhraj, which connects to sarf, I'll explain the details of sarf just now. But the aspect of sarf and ikhraj, they go together and they take the same rules in many of the things I'm going to say. This aspect of ikhraj, it has to be done immediately. You have to do it on your day of zakah. And I mentioned that it seems like you have until sunset of the day of zakah to do this aspect of ikhraj. Then the sarf, except in situations I'm going to mention, you have to give it out immediately. So this aspect of ikhraj and sarf, they have to be done immediately. I'm going to touch on it just now. But I want to get to a mas'ala, and that is, if you have to do these things immediately, how then can you have a day of zakah in Ramadan? How then can we have and say that the Sahaba had a month of zakah in Ramadan, when each person would have his own hawl, his own zakah here, and many times or sometimes more than one hawl. His hawl for his cash and his hawl for his animals and his crops. They don't have a hawl, but it will be another day of zakah, you're giving it out. So how can that happen? So that can happen in a couple of ways. So the aspect of ikhraj could be done. You could have calculated, I owe this much of zakah. Then there's a few situations where you can delay the sarf, giving it to the poor. I'm going to mention it just now. So if it happens that you can do sarf of your zakah in Ramadan, your hawl is before Ramadan and it's not too long a period, I'm going to mention it now. Before you do sarf, and that sarf will be in Ramadan, then you can delay it. You can delay your sarf to Ramadan and you'll end up giving your zakah in Ramadan. Right? That can work. But it will work for 1 year. Because the next year, you may not have that same reason that allows you to delay sarf. So what do we do? Another situation is your zakah day itself, the actual hawl day, the day of the hawl is in Ramadan. Then that person is okay. He gives his zakah every year in Ramadan because his hawl ends in Ramadan. So another situation is a person who, either we mention this aspect of sarf, it will be there for 1 year or 2 years, it may not be there always. So this person, his zakah date will come before Ramadan, or another situation, a person's zakah day will come after Ramadan. It will come after Ramadan. Because we're working with Ramadan as being the blessed month, most people want to give their zakah. But you have to do ikhraj and sarf as soon as your zakah day comes. So how then will it work? Then here what you do is, if your zakah day were to come after Ramadan, or on year one, your zakah day were to come after Ramadan, or it would become before Ramadan. So on year one, if your zakah day is before Ramadan, you do your ikhraj and your sarf before Ramadan. You have to do it. But then you have this option I'm going to mention. Let's say your zakah day comes in Rajab. So you have to do ikhraj and sarf. There's no delaying. Let's say you don't have the option of delaying. You do your ikhraj and sarf in Rajab. Right? So your next hawl will be after Ramadan. Right? So this which I'm going to explain applies to this situation, or if your hawl is after Ramadan. There's a mas'ala called ta'jeelu zakah. And that is giving your zakah in advance. So this you can do. And then you can have your substitute kind of zakah day, and that will be in Ramadan. So you will give your zakah in advance in Ramadan. So we mentioned year one, in our situation of before Ramadan in Rajab, you have to give your zakah. But then for the next year, you can give your zakah 10 months in advance by giving it out in Ramadan. Or the person whose zakah, let's say, his zakah day is going to be after Ramadan, let's say in Dhul Hijjah. So this person, if he gives it in Ramadan, he'd be three or 4 months early. So that falls into the mas'ala of giving zakah early. Giving zakah early. Like that, you'd be able to have your zakah day, quote unquote, in Ramadan. That's how you do it. But when giving zakah in advance, there's a few masail. Number one, you are not allowed to give zakah in advance unless the moment you want to give in advance, at that moment you already own the nisab. You already own the nisab. If you own less than the nisab, you want to give it out on the 10th of Ramadan, and the 10th of Ramadan you want to do your calculations that I mentioned, and you find out that you have less than the nisab, you can't give zakah now in advance, assuming that you may make a transaction tomorrow and that money may come in. You cannot do that. Also, when you give zakah in advance, you give zakah on what you have at present. What you have at present. You're going to do those 4 calculations I mentioned, those 4 steps, right? Including your debts and everything. But you can't assume that I may sell this thing tomorrow. Or there's a buyer, we're discussing, we're negotiating, but he may come and give me this big amount of money. You can't calculate, you don't calculate it on that day you're giving in advance. Only what you have, you do the 4 steps that I mentioned. Then, we said it's your substitute zakah day. It's your substitute zakah day. Therefore, you have to remember your actual zakah day. Because on that zakah day, you calculate your actual assets, your actual zakah. Then you see, how much do I have? You take the 2.5%, you see the amount. And then you look back, I gave zakah 2 months ago, or however many months ago. How much did I give out? If you gave out the correct amount, you're good. If you gave out more, then your zakah counts, the extra is sadaqah. Unless one thing, I'm going to mention it now. And if you've given out less, then you have to give out the remainder in zakah. Right? So that's what will happen. That's what happens. So your substitute, your own, in your head day of zakah, your substitute day of zakah can be in Ramadan. So you're distributing most of your wealth in Ramadan, most of your zakah, if not all, if not even more, in Ramadan. But you have to have your original day of zakah so that you can calculate to see how much you've given, how much was it that you've given, is it enough or less? Is it enough or less? The fuqaha say that this aspect of giving zakah in advance, it's not mustahab, it is permissible. It is permissible. The hadith of Abbas radiallahu anhu, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Hiya alayya wa mithluha. Right? That hadith indicates something else. And that is, the fuqaha say you can give zakah in advance for 2 years. You can give zakah in advance for 2 years only, not more than 2 years. But after you doing your calculations and you deducting 2.5% for 1 year, then you must still have the nisab to give it for the other year. And if you've given out zakah for 2 years, you're going to do the calculations twice on both years. And then you're going to keep in mind. So for example, your zakah you gave in advance for 2 years, 10,000. On your zakah day of year 1, the zakah that you had to actually give out was 8,000 or 4,000. We say your zakah, any amount, it's covered. What about that extra? We say that extra, since you intended it when you gave it to be zakah in advance, that will be your zakah for the following year. So therefore you'd look, in the following year, you'd say the person has zakah in the first year was 8,000. So there's 2,000 left. So year 2, he'd come and calculate his zakah. He'll see that his final amount that he had to pay, it was 1,000. So his zakah was more than it was. It was 2,000 that was left. So he had given 2,000. 1,000 counts as zakah and the other one is sadaqah. Or his zakah is 4,000. So then the remainder is 2,000. So then he has to complete the 4,000. So that's what it means. That's what it means to give zakah 2 years in advance. And that's important masail. And they say that if you give zakah in advance, the person you give it to, he must be a person who can accept zakah at the moment that you give it. So if he's poor, and we're going to mention the fiqh in the next lesson, on the day you give your zakah, and he becomes rich on the day your hawl ends, your zakah is fine. If he died before your hawl ends, your zakah is fine. So that's a few important masail with regards to giving zakah in advance. And like this, you can be able to give out your zakah in Ramadan, as well as not falling short in the other aspects. And that's in summary with regards to these masail. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to teach us that which benefits us, and to benefit us with that which He teaches us. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.